So I mentioned in the last lecture that this is now a time when the governments were sort of controlling what went past them graphically, so these posters were almost screened by them. And the other thing was that a lot of journalists at this time did not have access to what was happening during the war, so a lot of people were kind of unaware of what was happening on the fields, and so these posters were kind of their only window into the goings-on during the war. Their main goal was to get civilians to join the efforts. They were trying to get people really motivated to join up. So they were kind of using whatever tactics through the poster design that they could think of. Some of it was not always so nice, but they kind of tried to manipulate a little bit. And what with Britain being one of the only countries that didn't have a draft, they really had to step up their efforts. Seeing that these posters are not quite photorealistic, but we're seeing more less whimsical and more straightforward adult-looking face. We're seeing shading. We're seeing more realistic looking depictions of people. We're not seeing a stylized Art Nouveau. We're not seeing the flowing hair, the exaggerations. We're not even seeing the Japanese style prints anymore. In fact, there's almost something militaristic about the design itself. We've got the very obvious finger pointing that is sort of summoning, calling you upon you to sort of rise to the occasion, and just a very direct, authoritative look to it. Sort of like, I'm choosing you, you've been selected. This poster was designed by Alfred Leet, which was originally made for a magazine called London Opinion. Something completely different in this one, which is almost a heroic storybook illustration inspiring people in a completely different way to join. This illustration has an enormous amount of color and liveliness, sort of getting you into the action. You almost can see the movement jumping right off the page. This is a lot different from the static image with the pointed finger, so this is sort of like, join the war and you will be among men like this, and there's something you gotta do. Like, if you will, was almost this emasculating imagery where they kind of preyed upon men's guilt to try to get them to join. So if the adventure didn't get you, if the authority didn't get you, having this image with a father with a young daughter on his lap, they thought maybe this would kind of speak to you a little bit better. And with this image, it was almost an insult that you have the son, who is obviously too young to make the decision to volunteer on his own. He's playing with these little soldier figurines while the dad is sitting in the chair, so it's almost suggesting something along the lines of, even your young child is interested in this effort, so what are you doing? What are you waiting for? And that the design is uninspired. There's nothing particularly memorable about the artwork in this. So while you can see different techniques in the media employed by the other images, this one just sort of just a typical drawing, not too detailed, not too statement making, if you will. The image should look familiar. This is the famous Uncle Sam, and immediately you'll notice the pointing finger, which is a lot like the Right Honorable Earl Kitchener that you saw earlier. But only the look on his face is a lot more stern. So this is done by the artist named James Montgomery Flagg. And at the time of making this, he had absolutely no idea how big it was going to get, that this was going to be such an iconic image for years and years to come, with lots of parodies of it, and this is just an image that we've all seen countless times before. So, interestingly enough, America did not, well, the United States rather, did not wind up joining the war until a little bit later, but yet they did have an enormous effort on the creation of the posters. And it's a little bit unclear who Uncle Sam is, but it's thought that it was persona that was created a decade beforehand with the initials US, Uncle Sam, kind of embodying the American person. So there were 4 million copies of this printed, and the goatee was added to his own face, his own self-portrait, just so he wouldn't have to get a model to sit for him. So President Roosevelt was president at the time, and he later on praised his resourcefulness for having used his own face. So this is not representing an actual person. This is just sort of a mixture of an amalgamation of his own face with some other features. Very patriotic with the stars and the red, white, and blue. And yeah, that's kind of how this image became such a huge emblem rather, for American propaganda posters. Adamant, it's a very catchy tagline that "I want you" is sort of what made history. It was just a very, very direct call for people to join the recruiting efforts. And this image shows a little bit about how women were used in the propaganda posters. These were like pinup images, actually, and if all else failed, then of course you cannot resist a beautiful woman on your poster asking you to join. Now this image is by Howard Chandler Christy. These women that he would paint were kind of referred to as the Christie girl. So these were definitely sexually charged images. However, they were still pulled together, professional looking, very, very clean cut, kind of bourgeoisie, fashionable. So as you can see, Chrissy's main goal here was to sort of glamorize these posters, make them appealing, make them something kind of in fashion. So he got into the wartime illustrations through being a magazine illustrator. Was to work on men in 2 ways. The first being that they were hoping that seeing that these playful young women dressing up in these costumes would inspire men to say, hey, look, if they can do it, I can do it, kind of emasculating them once again, making them feel like because of the way women were seen at the time as being a little bit less serious, kind of made them think, well, if they're willing to join, what am I doing sitting here wasting my time? And the other thing was, associating this beauty and glamour and temptation with benefits that you might receive from joining the Navy. And I think the text goes pretty well with the image. I see that the font kind of reflects the painterly qualities, the hand-drawnness of the image. And the colors, the orange and blue, are reflected in her uniform, of course. And for just a little bit from the Central Powers, we have another Julius Klinger image. This is called Kriegsland Laya image, showing a dragon with its neck going through the top part of a figure 8, pierced by 8 arrows. Klinger was able to go back to Austria at the start of the war, and this is a very different poster, although we can see that it is going back to the sac placat style and principles of the style. And the reason that we have so many instances of the number 8 here were to represent the 8th war loan. So the German government was a little bit more lenient in letting them use the style that they were accustomed to. They were able to use these modern abstract images for the war posters. They weren't demanded to change their style necessarily. Notable about this is that the number 8 is also acting as a noose around the serpent's head, so it's not just showing the number, but the shape of the number is being incorporated directly into the image. It's actually serving a purpose. So everything here is very much deliberate. We also have a stark contrast between the very clean lines of the text and the 8. There's nothing scraggly about it, contrasted with the little bit rougher, the hair and the shape of the serpent coming forward. So we're kind of seeing this like wildness kind of being tamed and subdued and stifled, strangled by the numbers. So you got this kind of reining it back in. So it's a very dramatic image. It doesn't need to say a lot. It just needs to say it well, which is, of course, the exact principles of this style. So yeah, there you have it. These are a minimal representation of some of the war posters that were used during World War I.